My wife and I talk about this all the time. We're going to make a lot of mistakes as parents, but we're going to be there. And just simply by being there and showing your kids that you love them and providing a stable foundation, I mean, after that, everything else just kind of takes care of itself.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue podcast. I am your host, Laurence. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a little while since I released one of these traditional interview episodes. I had a bit of a summer holiday and we were away for a little while, but we're back now. Hopefully there'll be a few episodes coming up over the next few weeks. Reminder, if you want to be a guest on a future episode, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk. There is a sign-up form over there where you can get in contact with me. I would really love to hear from you, get you as a future guest, so please do reach out. Today's guest is Justin. Justin is a teacher from America, and he reached out online. We connected through a forum about podcasting. He has his own podcast all about TVs and movies. It's called the Main Attraction Podcast. So if you like the conversation we have, if you like Justin, do go over and give that a listen and a follow as well. Today we talk about a few different things relating to parenting. We talk about the differences between Justin's son and his daughter, talk about how they actually get on quite well, and if he's got any secrets behind that. We talk about Justin's wife's health struggle. It was quite a long journey that he had to go through, and the aspects that he had to take on, the roles he had to play as a father and a husband in that situation. And I really appreciate him opening up and sharing that story with us. We also touched on a little bit about being the best dad possible, learning some things from our own parents, or maybe learning things from our parents that we want to not replicate. I really appreciated Justin's time. I think the conversation is fantastic. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get into the conversation. All right, so Justin, thank you so much for joining us on Dad Dialogue podcast. Just start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Okay. As you said, my name is Justin Strawn. I live in Olive Branch, Mississippi, which I know your listeners won't know. If they're familiar with Memphis, Tennessee in the United States, if they're at all familiar with it, it is a suburb just south of it. So that's probably the best way to describe it for folks. But my wife and I, we have been married it'll be 19 years in September of this year. We have two children. We have a son who is going to be a senior in high school this year. This will be his last year of high school. And a daughter who is 12 years old. She's starting 7th grade, so she's still got a little ways to go. But that's our family. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching. This will be my 19th year as a teacher. I have also been a bus driver for pretty much that entire time as well. I've done some coaching throughout the years. This is my second year to coach at the school that I'm currently at. I coach soccer, which is football to y'all over there. But that's what I've been coaching. So, but yeah, that's just kind of a little bit about me. I also host another podcast as well that would love for you to listen to. It's called the Main Attraction Podcast. If you're into movies or television, we'd love to have you listen because we really enjoy doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Go over and listen if you are interested. I agree. So I'm curious, what have you found has been the biggest difference between raising a boy and a girl?
Oh, gosh. They're very different, that's to say the least. And look, and it's different from child to child. But, yeah, our son it's a little odd because they've kind of switched what I would have thought. You kind of think, boys are a little bit more laid back and girls are, the ones you filled with drama and like that kind of stuff and take everything really seriously. And it's not my son. He just really latches onto things, and he's a great kid. And he just sometimes he fixates on things and focuses on things, and we're like, it's okay. We can golf is his thing, and that's one of the things that I love about him is he's learned how to turn that into a positive. So he is always got a golf club in his hand. He's always we bought him a net that he can always go out and hit golf balls into, so he can continuously practice. Because that's the thing, once he gets fixated on something, he's not going to let it go, and that's kind of what I always thought a girl would be. And our daughter is just kind of real laid back and just not, she's into band, but she hasn't. I don't think that's her calling, like golf is for our son. So she's just still kind of figuring things out. She wants to be on the dance team and all this kind of stuff. So it's been very different. They both have very different personalities. My daughter, I think, has a little bit more of my personality, whereas I think my son has a little bit of my wife's personality, even though I spend more time with my son because I take him to all of his golf tournaments in the summer because I'm a teacher. So I end up spending kind of more time with him in that regards. But like I said, they still seem to have taken on the opposite personalities a little bit more, at least in my opinion.
That's interesting. And so how long has your son been into golf? Like, when did he kind of latch onto that?
Pretty much as soon as he could like swing a club. When he was younger, when he was like 3, 4, 5 years old, my wife and I, he was originally staying with a sitter throughout the course of the day while we were at work, but it wasn't working out. It was hard to get the times and stuff because we both had very, very early schedules, and it was difficult to make that work. So he ended up staying throughout the day with my grandparents, so his great grandparents, and he loved them. They are still two of his favorite people of all time. They passed away not too terribly long ago, but
I'm sorry.
but he. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. It's been a little while. I say not too very long. My grandfather probably died 5 years ago, and then my grandmother more than that. But it feels like it was just yesterday. But. Yeah. But when he was with them throughout the course of the day, my grandfather had an old set of clubs that he just kept in the house. My son, anything with the ball he wanted, he'd play with it. And so he would go grab his golf clubs, even though he's 4 years old and he's swinging this grown man's golf club throughout in their backyard. And that's just kind of how he latched onto it. And he's done some other things. He played a little bit of baseball, tried a little bit with basketball, but it's always been golf. And that's kind of been the thing that he has latched onto, and he continues to latch onto.
That's really cool that he has latched onto it, and I'm guessing it's just on you guys as parents throughout that experience to help facilitate that and encourage that.
Yeah, because like of all the sports that he picked out, that's the one I never played before. Like I played all the other ones, but that one I never played before. So like I've just kind of like had to learn and go along. I knew the rules. I knew all about that. I mean, I watched it on television, but in terms of like going out and playing, I never had. So it was like the one I was like, I can't really help him here. So we had to go find people who could. And he's taken lessons throughout the course of his lifetime. And he's on the high school golf team now. So, it's been fun to watch that because, like I said, it's not when we had a son, we think about potential things he might play. Golf was never on my radar. And but it's been the one that he just has gravitated towards as a result of just being so close to my grandfather growing up.
That's really cool. And did you find that having had that experience with him, that you thought that something like that would happen with your daughter as well at a similar age? Or did you have any expectations of her latching onto something in the same way?
No, I didn't. Because like I said, that was kind of a unique circumstance with Jackson. We never even saw that with like, it wasn't something like I did as a child. I don't ever remember. The only thing I latched onto, I like watching cartoons. So I didn't have any experience with that. My wife didn't really have any experience with that. So we weren't really expecting our daughter to do the same thing. It wouldn't have surprised us if she did. But I don't think either of us, when she was born, was like, oh, she's definitely going to find something and just kind of attached to it and like that be her thing for the rest of her life. And she hasn't. It's like I said, she's taking a more typical teenage route to, I'm going to explore. I want to try new things. I'll eventually figure out, what it is I want to do. But, and like I said, I think she's starting to figure it out. I think she has really gotten into band a little bit. She, like I said, she really wants to get into dance and doing dance team and stuff like that. But it's never been something there's never been one like thing she's like, oh, I have to do this. And it didn't surprise us that much that she was like that.
Yeah. And at 12 years old, she's got so much time to figure out what she wants to do.
Oh, yeah.
So with that age gap of about 5 years, how do they get on? Are they friends with each other?
Yes, that is the one area where we have been incredibly blessed by our children, because so many of the kids, so many children that we see with our friends, they bicker, they argue, they fight. It doesn't matter what the age gap is. It could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 7 years. There's going to be, there's always like sibling stuff going on. Our two kids, they have always gotten along just incredibly well. I don't ever recall them fighting. They don't ever yell at each other. Like I said, we've been incredibly blessed. I wasn't expecting that. My brother and I, because I do have a brother, We got along, but we still had arguments. We still got into it a little bit. I mean, even though we got along pretty well. Same thing with my wife and her sister, because she has a sister. Same thing. They got along pretty well, but there were always issues, and there would always be some type of an argument or anything that came up between the two of them. And we kind of expected that between our two kids, and they just haven't done that. And like I said, we've been thankful for it because they just really get along really well.
Well, I think everyone listening to this podcast will be wanting me to ask this question. So what's your secret? How do you raise kids against in a fight?
I don't know. Like I said, I honestly don't know. I mean, and it's not that they don't argue or fight with anybody. I mean, my son can get angry and he can get upset by a lot of things. So, I mean, that's one thing. And my daughter, part of it, I think, is my daughter just lets a lot of stuff go off her back. I think she has always been that way. She's like a duck in that regard. Just things just roll right off. And my son has always been he's just a really kind person for the most part. I mean, that's one thing that most everybody tells us about it that always sticks out with him is he has always just demonstrated a certain amount of kindness, and he wants everybody to be happy. He wants everybody to have a good time. He wants, that's just something that he wants. And I think that is being the older child in that being like that. I think that has helped, but you just try to raise them the best you can, and you hope they turn out right. I mean, there's no secret sauce or secret formula to this. That's one thing that we have come to learn, because we had all these ideas when our children were born. These are the things we're going to do. These are things that we have to do, and they blew those up like within the second day that we had them. So I wish there was a secret formula, but there's not.
Well, you're clearly doing something well then. To be able to speak so highly of their approach to life is a credit to you and other people that have been in their life. So it's a credit to you and your family for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
So I understand we chat a little bit that your wife had some health issues recently. Would you be able to just share a little bit about that journey, how it impacted you and your kids, and how you needed to adapt?
Yeah, so it all started, actually a long time ago. It actually started back in 2011, and weirdly enough, it started with a bout of strep throat of all things. Back in 2010, my wife was dealing with strep throat. She kept getting it. Never had her tonsils taken out. So the doctor said, well, the only way the strep's ever going to go away for good is if we took your tonsils out. And we're like, okay, well, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do that. We'll get that surgery set up. We'll get that taken care of. And so in the middle of January of 2011, she's going to have her tonsils taken out. Well, the day before the surgery was to take place, she ends up. I end up coming home. I make it home before she does that day, and our house is flooded because our pipes burst in our home. And so gosh. Yeah, this is this is not the time for this. My wife's about to have surgery. This just isn't going to work, because they had to shut the water off. They had to do, the house wasn't going to be livable for the next few days. It just wasn't. And my wife needed to recover from surgery. So what ends up happening is she ends up my in-laws end up coming over. They live about 2.5, 3 hours away from us. They come over, and after her surgery, they take her back with them so she can recover at home. And while that was going on, I was living with my grandparents, who I just mentioned that my son stayed with, trying to coordinate getting all the stuff that needs to be taken care of the house, and it worked out really well. My mother-in-law, was glad to take my wife back so she could be a mom again, and she could baby her and help get her nurse her back to health, and all that was great. But the one thing that it did cause is she wasn't moving. My wife was barely getting up. She wasn't doing anything, so she ends up developing a blood clot in her leg, and they end up missing it at first, but they eventually do catch it. And because they missed it the first time, it ended up being a lot worse than it probably should have been. Her leg swells up to just an obscene amount that you've never seen before. It was just it looked absolutely awful. It was painful. She could barely walk on it. But they do surgery. They get rid of it. She makes a full recovery. She didn't have any issues with it again until about 18 months later, after we have our daughter. She has some issues with it then. But then for 10 years, she's good. For 10 years, she has no issues. She's on medication. And then one of the reasons that she ended up getting this clot is because she has a anatomical, there's something in her anatomy. Where it's called May-Thurner syndrome, where a vein sits on top of a artery. I can't remember which ones it is, but and it's higher up in her leg. So that's one of the reasons it got missed. But this is why she ends up getting clots, is because of this anatomical, not defect, but like just anomaly, I guess is the best way to put it. And so she doesn't have any problems with it for 10 years. And in 2022, she ends up getting another one. And we think they do the surgery, they get rid of it. So we think we're good. And then in August of last year, she gets another clot and they do the surgery. But 2 days later, it's right back. And so they do another surgery. 2 days later, it's right back. And we're like, we can't do this. This isn't working. So they end up putting her in the hospital for a few days. And the hospital here doesn't know what to do with her at this point because she just keeps getting clots. So they just let her sit there for like 3 days. And while clots are just constantly building up in her leg and nobody's doing anything. Thankfully, a person who lives in our neighborhood, he is a VP at one of the hospitals here in the Memphis area. He's like, we've got a vascular department. If you want a really good vascular department, if you want me to get you an appointment, I can. And then we're like, please do something. And once we met with the doctor, they did some MRIs, they did CAT scans, they did all this type of stuff. And he said, the doctor that we met with is like, because they let it go so long, there's not a whole lot we can do for you. It's the clots are now completely, your leg is just like 100% fully clogged at this point. He said there is a Hail Mary procedure that we can try, and we'll just give it a shot. But if not, there's not much we can do. We didn't know what to do at this point. We're like, she can't live like this. And he's like, I understand. He said, but we'll give this a shot, and if it works, then we can do a bypass. And the bypass would be a very extensive bypass where they had to take certain arteries and veins from her leg and like move them to her other one and like reroute the way the blood flows. So this is what we were hoping would actually end up working, but we were told it had almost no shot of working. Well, when she goes in for surgery, it ends up taking 10 hours. They actually did making it work. And it was a blessing that it made it work. But it also ended up like forcing her into this massive recovery. So she's basically spends the next 6 months in and out of the hospital. She had numerous infections throughout the course of the period. Because of all the trauma that she went through, all the wound care that she has to go through, and all this type of stuff. So like I said, I think we're in the hospital 5 different occasions. Probably spent about 2 total months in the hospital over the next 6 months. And this is, like I said, she recovered and she's much better now. She still is not 100%. We don't know if she'll ever be 100%. And that's a very difficult thing for her, to have to wrestle with and to struggle with mentally and physically. But she's like I said, she's alive and she's able to walk. She didn't lose her leg. So these are all things that we were afraid that might end up happening. But it was a long, arduous recovery. And it was very difficult. Just on the emotional toil of going through that on her was very difficult. And for me, I was trying to balance, being with her, taking care of the kids, being at work, because like I said, this was all taking place during the school year. So there was a lot of stuff that was trying to juggle it, trying to make everything work was always difficult. It was never easy. But it was always this is what's going to happen. And I was very thankful that our kids were old enough that they could kind of take care of themselves. My son was 16 at the time. He turned 17 in February of this year. He picked up a lot of slack. My daughter has always been an incredibly independent child, and she's like, I'll just take care of myself. I'm good. Y'all don't need to worry about me. So that's always been really nice. And that helped out a lot because, like I said, it's very difficult to try to have to be with your wife. And when you're with your wife in the hospital and she's recovering and you're getting emails and texts from parents about why kids are doing whatever it is in class, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not there. I wish I could be there. So like I said, juggling all that was incredibly difficult, incredibly stressful, but ultimately worth it all because she was able to make, for the most part, a full recovery. Like I said, her leg will never be what it was before all this took place, and that's a difficult thing for her to handle. But I do my best to try to reassure her that she's better off than so many people would have been in her similar situation. So it was a struggle, to say the least.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. That is that's a journey with, I'm sure, so much kind of battling. I mean, the fact that she went in for those surgeries like days after days after days, like that would have been the process of, preparing and like getting yourself ready for you and your kids. Like, this is what's going to happen next.
Right.
And then you're just hoping and praying that everything comes together, and then it just comes back again. That must have been filled with so much heartache. How do you support your kids through something like that?
You just try to be there as much as you can for them. We were always trying to tell, trying to be there to let them know, I'm going to still be here. If you need me, call me, text me. Because basically the way it worked when she was in the hospital, I would spend one night at the hospital with her. Then the next day I would go home, spend the night at home, be with the kids, make sure, that they've got what they need, check in with them, make sure that, they're not being overwhelmed. Make sure that they are in that their state of mind is good and that they're handling this okay. Thankfully, because I am a teacher, I knew a lot of the teachers that are at their school, and I was always asking them, can you check in with them? Can you help, just keep an eye on them, make sure that they're okay. So like I said, we had a great network of support, and that helps because it was a difficult time to go through. So we were really blessed in that regard.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it sounds as though you were able to put in some sort of systems in that regard,
definitely.
Then, one day here, one day there, to help support.
If we hadn't been able to, it never would have worked. I mean, and like I said, if our children had been, if this had been 5 years ago, when my son is 5 years old and my daughter is, 7 years old. I'm sorry, when my son is 12 years old, my daughter is 7 years old. It would have been much more complicated because I couldn't just leave them at home. I would have to be at home with them or find somebody who could keep them for at least a couple of days, and it would have just made everything it would have made everything a lot more trying, like I said. And our kids being, like I said, my son stepping up and saying, you know what, I want to, make sure that my sister has what she needs, and my sister and his sister being just like, I can take care of myself. I'm good. Y'all don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Dad, you worry about Mom. That helped because I knew because my wife needed to have her husband with her, and that was very, very important, like I said. But I didn't want to just abandon my kids either. So like I said, I've tried having a system, like you said, I want to be here some nights, I want to be at home some nights. That was a huge help for us.
I mean, and then also alongside all of this, you've still got a job to worry about. You've still got to bring home the money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you
reconcile that?
That was probably the hardest part because I missed more work, far more work, missed far more days than I've ever missed in the school year this past year. Mm-hmm. There was when she first went that surgery, I ended up going on MFLA, which is family leave, basically. I had some days that I got paid for, but eventually I ran out of days, and I was just taking days without pay. So thankfully we had some people who were able to help us out. My wife's parents basically told me, they said, please take care of our daughter. We will help y'all out in whatever we can ways financially, and they did, and we were very, very thankful for that. But yeah, I mean, even though the financial part of that was we were getting help, the help and the aid that we needed, the job was still there. I mean, I still had kids who had a sub for 3 weeks straight, and then there was another time where they had a sub for a week straight. And I'm getting the person who I work most closely with. She works right next door to me. She teaches the same subject that I do. She's telling me, your kids they're not doing the work the sub's telling them. I'm getting all these emails from parents. My boss is incredibly understanding, but she did say, I do want you to know that there's not much academically going on in your classroom. Like, I know I feel bad about this, but there's nothing you can do. And that honestly was arguably probably the hardest part because my job wasn't getting done the way that it should have been done. And that was a very, very difficult thing to deal with because, like I said, I could make sure that my kids were okay because I could go and see them. I could make sure that my wife was doing okay because I could see her and spend the time with her. But I couldn't go back to school during the day and just come in for one day and then leave. And it just wouldn't have worked that way because I had to be other places, and it was difficult. It was incredibly difficult. It was one of the most trying school years I've ever had because, like I said, they never could get into a rhythm because I couldn't get into a rhythm. The last time we were in the hospital for the last time back in February. So from August through February, I was missing extended periods of time, and they just didn't have the same teacher that they did. Finally, once we got past that last hospital stay, things evened out and things got better, but it was a struggle because, like I said, the kids I taught, their grades were much lower than they normally have because they just figured, hey, he's not here, so I don't have to do anything. And that's not the way it worked in school. Even just because you got a sub, you still got to do the work. And like I said, that was really difficult to deal with.
I think any teacher out there is probably connecting to what you're saying right now, is that if there's any extended period of time away, like maternity leave, even when you have a child, and a sub comes in for an extended period of time, they're always the work doesn't go away for those 6 months. It just might add up, and then you just have to tackle it all when you come back, and you have to fix problems, you have to make people feel happy, you have to respond to all the parents. Like, it shows that you care about your job as well, that that had a big impact during that time. But yeah, that must have been a big challenge. So you must be kind of excited to kind of start afresh, look forward to a new school year, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like I said, this past year was one of the most challenging that I've had. Hopefully, we won't have anything. We won't have anything like we had this past year. So to be able to have a year where I'm hoping, it's a normal year where I'm at school every day. With just the occasional, miss every so often for somebody being sick or something like that. That's just the normal stuff that comes up. But being able to be there to be able to, just not only just to be there and be there for my kids, but know that I'm going to be able to pull a full paycheck every single month. Whereas I wasn't doing that my wife and I were looking at it this past year, and I did not pull a single full paycheck the entire school year because even though I had sick days that I could use at the very beginning of all that, the bus driver portion, because that's not, if you miss, you just lose that pay for that day. So like I said, not only was I losing teacher pay, but I was also losing bus driver pay as well. And that started immediately. So I didn't pull a single full paycheck throughout the entire course of the year because there was always something. And that was that, I'm looking forward to that. I'll be able to get my normal salary at this point. So
get things back to normal. And you said your wife is doing better now. Still needing the occasional appointment, it sounds like. Is she back to work herself? Is everything else, or?
For the most part, she is. I mean, like I said, she'll never be able to do the same amount of physical activity that she was able to do before all this happened. That's just never going to be the case. But she's much closer to it than she ever was. She can now walk around. We went on vacation this past week. And, she was able to go shopping with our daughter, so she was able to walk around and do that for a good bit. She would have to stop and sit, though. There would be times when my daughter would be trying something on. Normally she'd be out there, waiting for her to come out. And instead, there were times when she'd have to go find a place to sit, and my daughter would have to come to her. So, like I said, there have been some adjustments, and those are just parts of recovering that she'll have to always do. But she's very much back to where she was. I mean, like I said, just a few small adjustments that you're willing to do, have to rest a little bit. Whereas, she could go for 10 hours without having to rest. But now she has to take a break every so often. So she's back at work doing her job without any accommodations, which has been a huge benefit to her because she loves her job. She loves what she does. And she just needed to be able to do that. And she's been able to, like I said. So that's been a real plus because there was a time when she wasn't sure that she was going to be able to do anything that she once was able to do. And for her to be able to basically resume her normal life, like I said, I would say at like 98% of what she was beforehand we've been very thankful for that. And we're very blessed that she's been able to, because a lot of people might not have been able to recover as well as she has.
Yeah, that's very true. And so I'm just curious now, because you're kind of at the end of the journey, so to speak, kind of on the trajectory to kind of keep on improving. If you reflect back on how you might have felt when you're right in the middle of it, how does it even compare? Like, were you able to maintain like positivity? Were you able to maintain, that mentality as the person supporting all these different people, you've got to kind of shoulder a lot of that emotional support, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was for the most part. The hardest part was just being tired. I mean, it's like I told somebody not too long before the school year let out this past year. Every single day I was exhausted. I mean, it was just, there was no day that I came into work where I was not just like dragging myself into work every single day. Or, when I was going back and forth from the hospital to the house, I was just exhausted. And there were times I would just, if my wife fell asleep in her hospital bed, I was more than willing to just go ahead and fall asleep there too. Positivity, once I knew that she got out of that surgery and she was going to be able, and that it was successful and they did what they needed to do and the bypass worked, being positive was not difficult. And I had to be positive because she needed to be reassured that even though the recovery was going to be long and hard, she was going to get there. And so I was constantly trying to encourage her, constantly trying to remind her that she can do it. But at the same time, when you're as exhausted as I was, there was just no way I was going to be able to hide that. And everybody could see it, and everybody was like, you look tired. And I was like, yeah, because I am.
Well, hearing that, I think it makes me appreciate just being tired from having two young kids is like, I'm happy being tired from having two young kids. I'm glad to not have to be exhausted from a situation such as yours. And I think it's great to hear stories like this because, we can come around you and sharing the story and just remind ourselves that life can bring up these things and it can help us appreciate the smaller things in life, like when your 1.5-year-old is just screaming all night long. Like a lot of people
I remember those days. I remember those days. Yeah, I remember those days very well. Don't worry.
So I was curious, how did your upbringing and your family life affect you and the choices that you've made as a father? Is there anything that you've kind of chosen to impact and put things in place from your own upbringing?
It's interesting because my mom and dad, they ended up getting divorced when I was around 2 years old. My mom ended up marrying somebody else about a year after that. And my dad, I love my dad to death. I do. I love him to death. But being a dad was never on his radar. It wasn't something he ever really wanted to do. When they got married, he told my mom, I really don't want to have kids. And she did, and they just ended up having kids. And it wasn't something he wanted. But he has been as a part of my life as he could. Like most people, when I was growing up, if any of my friends had divorced parents, they would often talk about, I would hear them say, well, the first time I ever heard somebody say, well, I'm going to spend the weekend with my dad, I was like, you do that? Like, even though my dad lived like 30 minutes away, I think we spent the night at his house once, maybe throughout the entire course of my childhood. And like I said, a lot of people say, well, that's awful. Why would he not, have a more active part of your life? And maybe it is, but this was never something he wanted to do. So he was doing the best that he could. Being a dad wasn't on his radar. It wasn't something that he ever aspired to be. And my stepdad, I loved him too, but he was also 10 years older than my mom, and he had two kids that were basically grown by the time that he ended up marrying my mom. So he didn't really know what to do with us when he married my mom. My brother was 4, my brother was 5, I was 3. He didn't really know exactly what to do with children that young because he hadn't had them in a long time. Once we got older, he became a much more active part of our lives. When we got like high school and things like that, he began to okay, these are like kind of quasi adults. I can kind of figure out what to do with them now, but. Right. But I learned a lot what I didn't want to be as a parent from them, as sad as that might sound, but it is. I mean, my dad didn't have much to do with us. I made it very clear once we had kids, I was going to be an active part of their lives. I was going to always, be there for them. My son and I, we spend every summer traveling all across our state and across a couple other states here in the United States, for him to play golf tournaments in. And, that's a big part of what we do in the summer. My daughter, she and I will go see movies together because she likes to go check out movies. This is, so I try to be an active part of their lives because I didn't have that when I was growing up. I had some other people who, my uncle he tried to step up and do some of those things, but he had his own kids too. So, I mean, he didn't just like focus and be our dad because he had his own kids he needed to worry with. But I did have some people who would step in, like my grandfather and my grandparents. They were very, very much part of our lives, and they tried to fill in some of those gaps as well. But, my mom was. One thing I did learn from my mom, because she had a huge impact on our lives, because she was basically our only parent growing up, is, love your kids, love them as much as you can, just try to bring them up as best you can. That's kind of the biggest thing that I took away from that.
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting aspect, and it's interesting how you expressed it, that you've learned what you don't want to be or what you don't want to do. And that can kind of help inform your parenting choices when you're raising your kids.
Right.
How did you find out that your dad didn't want kids?
It's not. I mean, basically, it's one of those things where actions say a lot. I mean, he has never ever said I didn't want to have kids. That's not something he has ever said. When you talk to my family members, they will tell you that was something that he never really truly wanted to do. That was something that they would talk about quite a bit. Because when I talk about, what was he like growing up and all this type of stuff, and my mom would say, my mom didn't ever run him down, but she was honest about him. She was like, I loved your dad. He was great. I wanted to be around him, but they just weren't compatible. They didn't get married for the right reasons. They were very young when they got married. I think she was 19 when they got married, because they just wanted to get out of the house. They didn't want to be with their parents anymore. And the only way that their parents, this was back, in the 50s and 60s. Well, I guess technically it would be early 70s now to think about it. During that time period, if you wanted to leave your house, you had to get married, and that's the way it worked back then. So that's the reason they ended up getting married, because they just didn't want to live at home anymore. So they ended up getting married for a lot of the wrong reasons. But my mom made it work as best as she could. My dad made it work as best as he could. But like I said, I mean, when you see your dad once a month, for dinner, and that's about all that you ever see him for, and he lives 30 minutes away, you learn very quickly that this parenting thing was never really something that he wanted to do. I mean, because, as close as we lived, basically the way it worked is my brother and I, we would go have dinner with him once a month. It would last about an hour. And my brother and I, we just would talk for like that entire time. My dad might throw in a sentence or two. It just, like I said, you learn very quickly, even though he has never said, I didn't want to be a parent, I didn't want to have kids. You can just tell that that's just not something he's good at. And like I said, for him to do anything at all, I mean, because a lot of dads in that situation would have just said, no, I'm done. I'm not going to do this. I didn't want to have kids, and I'm just not going to be part of their lives at all. And the fact that we get anything from him is shocking to me at this point. So.
Well, it's good that you can look back on it and kind of like look through all of that kind of time with like a positive lens and kind of take from it what you can in terms of like kind of, I mean, I hear a lot of dads talking about like breaking the cycle of, my dad learned from his dad, who learned from his dad about this, that, and the other, and how to raise kids. And I'm trying to be the active and trying to be engaged and rolling the floor with the kids. And so it sounds kind of like, I'm sure a lot of dads can relate to it. And a lot of people out there that will choose to listen to a parenting podcast are trying to be that person, right? To try to be the best dad possible. The final thing I kind of wanted to ask you about is, because you mentioned you've been a teacher for 19 years, I think you said. Is that right?
This will be my 19th year. I've been one for 18. I'm starting year 19. Mm-hmm.
So has being a teacher and being in the education world, has that taught you anything about how to raise kids, how to be a good parent?
Yeah, I mean, and look, as a teacher, it's glaringly obvious. I mean, the kids who have parents who are actively involved in their lives, the kids who have parents who, have expectations of their children, who are with them constantly, those are the ones who do well. Those are the ones who, you don't have discipline problems out of them. They're the ones that make the best grades. They're the ones that when they go home, if they have issues with the project or issues with the test or anything like that, their parents are going to be there. They're going to help them. And it shows up in spades. The ones who go home to a home where maybe the mom will be home at night, maybe the dad will be home that night, maybe they won't, maybe they will, maybe they won't. Those are the kids that struggle. Those are the kids who who don't have any type of stability, don't have any type of foundation at home, they're the ones who are going to give you the discipline problems. They're the ones that are going to, struggle to get by in school. I mean, it just, even if you're doing a lot of things wrong, if you're just there and trying your best, like I said, this is the one thing that I probably learned more as an educator that has helped me as a parent. Look, I'm going to screw up a lot as a dad. There's no question about that. My wife and I talk about this all the time. We're going to make a lot of mistakes as parents, but we're going to be there. And just simply by being there and showing your kids that you love them and providing a stable foundation, I mean, after that, everything else just kind of takes care of itself. I mean, there's going to be problems. There's going to be issues that you have to work through, and there's going to be problems that you come about with your kids. There's no question about that. But like I said, people say that when you work in the education world, and you're working with kids every single day, that shows up 100% of the time. As long as the parents are there and providing a stable foundation and providing love and support to those kids, they're going to be okay. It's the ones that don't have that they're the ones that struggle.
That's a really good way to put it. I totally agree with that. Like as a former teacher myself as well, and I normally ask our guests to kind of give some form of like sage advice at the end of each episode. But it seems to me that what you were just talking about there is just you're going to make mistakes, but you just need to be there, and the rest of it will kind of come naturally to you. That sounds like some pretty good advice that I would just like to highlight to people that, we're all going to mess up, but just the choices that we make is about being there with the kids and supporting them and making a safe environment. That's awesome. Do you have any other pearls of wisdom that you would like to share? Anything else that you've learned from your years of teaching and following?
No, the only thing, if you're a parent to be, I would say, have expectations, things that you want to do. But, your kids are going to tell you what's going to happen. I remember vividly when we were getting ready to have our son, we had all these things planned out and things that we said we weren't going to use a pacifier. We said, we're definitely going to breastfeed. There's no way we're ever going to do formula. And you know what? My wife's milk doesn't come in, so she can't breastfeed. We learned real quick, pacifiers a wonderful thing. You learn all these things. Like I said, your children are going to teach you a lot about what you're actually going to be like as a parent, because you may have all these wonderful plans, and when they don't go the way that you expect them to go, it's okay, because you're still there. You're still loving your children. You're still bringing them up. Be flexible, I guess, is the best way to put that.
That's awesome. No, I totally agree. And with someone who has two kids quite close in age, I think seeing my older son and seeing, he's made it to this age and he's calm and he's collected. He's just like a great child. Like he's really easy to get on with. He's really easy to parent. He's so lovely and kind to all the other kids. Like, we've got this parenting thing down. Then the second one comes along and he grows up into like a year and he's just like wild, just running around the house, just absolutely crazy. Tons of fun, but just throws you all these different kinds of challenges that you didn't get with the first one. And you think you're set up and you're ready to go, but you never know what you're going to get. But I like what you said. They're going to teach you how to parent them.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Justin, so much for coming on and sharing your stories with us. I think it's probably been a lot of help to a lot of people, a lot of listeners out there. So thanks so much for the time today.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. A big thank you again to Justin for coming on the show and opening up and sharing his stories with us. Reminder, his podcast is called The Main Attraction Podcast, where he and a friend of his discuss TV and movies. Do go over, give it a listen if that's the sort of thing that you'd be interested in listening to. I was really interested by some of the things that Justin was sharing, and I think you can hear through his stories just the true heart that he has for family and the importance that he places on family and being a great husband and being a great father. I really appreciate him, especially opening up about his past and his experiences with his own mum, his stepdad, and his father, and kind of how that helped shape him into the parent that he is now. I thought that was a really interesting perspective on it, and I think something that probably a lot of us can actually identify with and connect to. So really good, really glad that Justin could join us for this conversation. Reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk and sign up there if you would like to be a guest yourself. You can watch this on YouTube, listen to all the typical podcast places. You can give us a follow and subscribe on all the different places. It would really help us out. Or leave a review on your own podcast platform. That does really help us out. Share with a friend if they're a dad or a soon-to-be dad, Obviously, would really appreciate that. And more importantly than all, I hope you have a great day. I hope to speak to you soon. Goodbye.